So hello and welcome to the first WebWash webinar on creating pages with Page Manager and panels in Drupal 8. Now, I wrote a tutorial about this week, and if you want to see the written version, head over to webwash.net. If not, stick around and you will learn about a pretty cool suite of modules. So just a bit about myself. My name is Ivan Zuzek, and I've been a Drupal developer and also a senior consultant for about 10 years. I discovered Drupal a long time ago, and I've been writing about Drupal over at WebWash for about 5 years now. So if you want to learn about Drupal 7, there's no Drupal 6 unfortunately, but if you want to learn about Drupal 7, and yes, Drupal 7 is still relevant, head over to webwash.net where you can learn about tutorials for Drupal 7 and also Drupal 8. Now, I am exclusively writing just Drupal 8 tutorials from now on, which at first I thought was a bit too naive to give up on Drupal 7, but anyway, it's Drupal 8 all the way. So in this agenda, so what are we going to talk about in this webinar? Well, we're going to talk about 5 parts. So the first part, what's new in Drupal, will consist of slides, and apologies for that. I know as soon as people see slides, they go to sleep. I am one of them, but I've tried to make the slides as visually pleasing as possible. And then the next 4, so point 2 to 5, will be live demonstrations. So we're going to look at how to create a custom page. We're going to look at selection criteria and also how to use Panels IPE, in-place editor, and also how to override layout templates. And we're also going to look at Bootstrap Layouts for panels. Before I move on, let me just make sure there's no chat. No, okay, cool. Okay, so let's jump into things. What is new in Drupal 8? Well, Page Manager has become a full project in Drupal 8. Now, if you've used panels in Drupal 7, then you would know that Page Manager was a submodule of CTools, and that's about it. Whereas in Drupal 8, Page Manager has become a full-blown project. Then we have panels. Now, a lot has changed with panels. In Drupal 7, panels was the module, okay? Panels was everything. Panels was number 1, and then you had all your little modules trickling down from it. But in Drupal 8, Page Manager has become the main module, and panels is simply a variant type. And a lot of its functionality has been moved over to Page Manager. So now in Drupal 8, when you say, well, we're going to build a panels-powered website, it's really Page Manager and panels. And when I was initially writing the tutorial, I wrote in how to create pages with panels. But then while I was writing the tutorial, I realized, well, no, it's actually Page Manager. A lot of what panels did in Drupal 7 is handled by Page Manager. And that's why that's why this webinar is titled Page Manager and Panels. Now, we also have a new module called Layout Plugin. And this module has a pretty funny history. So when Drupal 8 was initially developed, this functionality was in Drupal core. Then it was taken out because it wasn't utilized. And then they created this Layout Plugin Contrib module. Now, for Drupal 8.3, it's gone back in to Drupal core. So right now, the stable release of Drupal 8 is 8.2. 8.3, which is scheduled to be released March, April, will have Layout Plugin in core. Now, what Layout Plugin does is that it offers a standard way of managing layouts. So in Drupal 7, and I always go back to Drupal 7, in Drupal 7, if you were to say create a custom layout using Foundation or Bootstrap as the grid system, and you want to use panels and display suites, well, you would have to implement 2 different layouts, one for panels and one for display suite, because both systems implemented their own layout system. Whereas in Drupal 8, now there's one standard one. And the best thing about this is that you can have modules such as Bootstrap Layouts, which implements, which ships a bunch of layouts specifically built for Bootstrap grids. And the best thing about it is you can use that for Panels and Page Manager in Drupal 8 and Display Suite for Drupal 8. But 6 months from now, I'm not sure if this module will even be relevant. But for now, if you're developing Drupal 8 sites, it's still required. So what's not available in Drupal 8? Not everything has been ported across, okay? The first one, which I did a bit of research just recently, was mini panels. Now in Drupal 7, you had a submodule in panels called mini panels, and essentially what it allowed you to do is that it allowed you to panelize the individual panel panes. So in Drupal 7, the individual blocks of content were called panel panes, and you could panelize those panel panes. So essentially it was a panels within a panel. Now that might seem crazy, and you straight away might think, oh no, that's a performance issue. But at first, when you discover the module, you're like, why the hell am I going to use that? But then when you discover an issue, then straight away it clicks in your head and you realize, oh wait, I can use mini panels for that. Unfortunately, that hasn't been ported across to Drupal 8. There is an issue and it's active, and that's about it. So I think there are a few subtasks that you can review, but that hasn't been ported across yet. Then we have CTools content types. Now in Drupal 7, you had CTools content types. Now these should not be confused with the standard content types. Honestly, I think these were terribly named, because if you've ever tried to teach somebody Drupal and you first teach them about content types and then you teach them about panels and CTools content types, they straight away ask, oh yeah, content types. Those are the content types, right? Like a page content type. And then you have to say, no, those are content types are totally different, and you have to explain the difference. Now in Drupal 8, you don't embed content types into a panels variant. You just use blocks. Plain old blocks. And the great thing about blocks in Drupal 8 is that blocks are 1,000 times better, 100 times better. Blocks are back. Blocks in Drupal 8 are fieldable. You can create different block types. In Drupal 7, they were kind of this part of Drupal that you only use if you had to use, and a lot of the times you just use panels for everything or display suite. But now in Drupal 8, blocks are being rebuilt from the ground up. And if you've used beans before, which essentially was just an entity type, a fieldable entity type that exposed things as blocks, well, essentially you have that. So you can create all these crazy block systems, this crazy block stuff. And the best thing about panels is that it has utilized this. So just use blocks and that's it. So if you want to implement your own CTools content type, if you're thinking in Drupal 7 ways, just implement a block and drop it in and you're done. Plain and simple. Now, another thing you should look at, okay, is these two distributions. So right now you have two, as far as I know. Now, if there are any Drupal 8 distributions that are powered by panels, let me know. But as far as I know, there are two major panels powered, or technically it should be Page Manager panels powered distributions. And the first one is Lightning and the second one is Panoply. Lightning is developed and maintained by Acquia, and it is pretty sweet. I would highly recommend that you download it and play around with it. Now be aware, it is a full-blown distribution, so you do get a full packaged Drupal solution for it. And it can really show you the power of panels and Page Manager and also Panelizer. Now, Panelizer is a separate module which is similar to panels. It just allows you to control and modify entity pages. And I'll probably do another webinar, a separate webinar on that, because I can talk for about an hour about it. But Lightning really utilizes panels. So if you want to see panels in action, download it, install it, play around with it. Another one is Panoply. Now, there is a stable version of Panoply for Drupal 7, but for Drupal 8, there's just an alpha. But again, play around with it and just dig through the code. Now, another thing that I highly recommend, Another thing which I highly recommend for people is that distributions are a great way to learn how things are built. Because remember, everything's open source. You can look at the code. And often when I play around with the distributions and I see something developed, such as, for example, I think the Drupal 7 version of Lightning integrated Panelizer with Workbench moderation. So you could create a draft version of a page and use Panelizer to click and drag and drop things around. And I thought that was amazing. And straight away, I was like, how did they actually do that? And I just downloaded the module, I downloaded the distribution, looked at the code, and then realized that they patched a whole bunch of things. And I actually learned a lot just by looking at the code. Now, be aware with Lightning, it is provisioned, or you set up the site using Composer, and Composer can be slow. And when I ran it locally, the Composer install, it took about 10 minutes. So I recommend that you run the Composer install command and then go grab yourself a coffee or a drink or whatever. So what are the required modules? What is required to actually get started? Well, it's just 4. Page Manager, of course, Panels, Layout plugin, and CTools. CTools will honestly always be around because a lot of the cutting edge stuff goes into CTools, and then eventually it trickles over to Drupal core. And a good example of that is the plugin system in CTools for Drupal 7 was kind of a precursor of the plugin system in Drupal 8. And also the conditions service in Drupal 8, I would like to say, was initially the access plugin for Drupal 7 in CTools. So you'll always need CTools. Okay, now it's demo time. Okay, let's jump into demo time. I promised that there were only a few slides, but I've got a few more slides at the end. But now it's demo time, and I practiced this demo and I hope everything works well. Okay, so right now I've got a stock standard Drupal 8.2 website, and it's just called Demo 1 because I've got multiple demos for multiple webinars. So to get started, just go to Extend, and I've already downloaded the modules. So we have Panels, and we have Panels IPE, and then we have a few other Page Manager, UI Page Manager. And then we have Layout plugin and Bootstrap Layouts. So the 2 that you need to install, and then its dependencies will sort everything else out, is Page Manager UI and Panels, and that's it. So let's just do that now. And I am using PHP 7, so it should be pretty quick, I hope. And that's just another side rant. If you are using Drupal 8, you try and use PHP 7. It's much faster. Okay. So to create your page, just go to Structure and then Pages. Pretty simple. And then and then click on Add Page. And what we'll do is we'll create a home page. We'll just call it, give it a title of homepage, original, I understand. We'll just give it a path of homepage. Then under variant type, you'll see we have panels. If you don't see panels, make sure you've installed and downloaded the panels module. Even if you've installed panels using Drush and you don't see it, just run a cache rebuild, because I noticed issues where I installed it using Drush and it still wasn't appearing, and I just did a cache rebuild and it appeared. But quickly with these other variant types, you do have block page. I was told that block page really shouldn't be used. It's there just as a basic variant, and it's really used for testing. So you really shouldn't use it. You should use panels. And then you have HTTP status code. Now this was in Drupal 7, and I remember seeing a video about this where essentially you can create a page, so essentially a route. So you could call it homepage-not found, select HTTP status code, and then tell it to return a 404. I've never actually used it. I've never had a need for it, but it's there. I don't know. You know, use it, don't use it. I've never used it. But it was there in Drupal 7. Okay. So let's just select panels. Now, these optional features you can enable later on. Now you need to configure your variant. So we'll just leave the label as panels, and we'll leave the builder as standard, and just click on next. And then from this layout, you select your actual layout from the drop-down. So let's just select 2-column. And here you can configure the content of the variant, but you can configure this later on. So let's just hit finish for now. All right, once it finishes loading up. So this interface is very similar to Drupal 7. I actually did a lightning talk about a year ago at the Sydney Drupal meetup about panels, and back then the interface was very different. And I've got a video of this on YouTube. So, and that video is pretty much out of date, whereas this video will be the most up to date because the UI has been fixed up. But from the left, you can manage the page information, page access, and all the list of variants. And then up here, you have a few other options. You can delete a page, add a variant, and also order variants. And I'll talk about these variants in a minute. But the first thing we'll do is just add in a few blocks. So to add a block, as I mentioned, blocks are back. There's no more CTools. As far as I know, there's no more panel panes. They're just blocks. And what we'll do is just add in 2 blocks. So I'll add in a block view called recent comments. And you can even configure the block settings before you add it in to a panel's region. So here you can see that we have the actual region defaults to left side, and then we can configure a few things, and then we can add in, we can click on add block. And then we can do the same for another block. And I'll just add in another block called recent content. And I'll add it to the right side. But you can also click and drag. I'll just click on save and update. Always click on save and update. And we'll also give this a title, custom homepage, and then just click on update and save. So the next thing we'll do, because this is a home page, we need to add it and set it as the front page. So let's do that. Let's go to configuration, basic page, and let's change this to home page. Now beware, in Drupal 8, you need to add in this /. If we were to add in just home page without the /, you get a little nice message saying a / is required. Now this must be because of the whole new routing system. So yeah, just put in a /. That's it. Okay, so let's just close this off. And if we go to the home page, we see this basic page. Nothing groundbreaking. We were able to easily create an arbitrary page with just a few clicks and without writing any custom code. Now, if you were to try to implement this using some other system, I don't even think there is a way of doing it in Drupal without writing custom code. Yes, you can use Display Suite and you can create a custom content type called landing page, then use something like paragraphs and stuff like that, but there's no module out there. If there is, please let me know, but there's no module out there that makes it this easy to spin up and create arbitrary pages. However, the UI isn't editor friendly, and that is a concern that I often have with panels. You wouldn't want to give this to editors unless they're trained up, because they can also do some major damage and they can break sites, especially if you're utilizing panels and page manager for your whole site and it's used on major pages. Okay, so now that we've created our first page, let's put in a selection criteria. Okay, so let's go back to the page and just refresh this. Okay, let's go back to the home page and let's add in a selection criteria and let's make it available only for logged in users. Okay. So the way to do that is you click on selection criteria and you select a condition. So Drupal comes with a bunch of conditions. So you have current theme, request path, user role. And let's select user role, and we'll then select authenticated user. So this means that Drupal will come along, check the selection criteria, see that a user role is required, and then it'll check to make sure that the current user has the authenticated user role. And then let's just hit save and update. So if I open up another tab, private window, you'll see that I get a page not found. Okay? But if I go to this page as I'm logged in, I can still access it because I've got the authenticated user role. Now, why does this happen? Well, that is because this condition returns false. And so what Page Manager does is that it'll display a variant, the first variant, which returns true. If no variants return true, then it'll simply return false, and then it'll display a page not found. So as a home page, this is pretty useless because a lot of the times you'll have non-logged in users or anonymous users come to the home page. So let's tweak it so that anonymous users can see it, but they will see a different variant. So the best way to do that is to go to the right and just click on add a variant. So we'll call this default. And what I'll do is I won't call this anonymous user. I'll just call it default because often when you are utilizing variants, you may want a default variant that is ordered right at the bottom and that is given if all the other variants return false. But again, it depends on your business logic and business needs. So I'll just call this default and I'll give it the panels variant type. We'll leave the builder as standard. And I'll just give this just a one column so you can see the difference. And let's just click on finish. And what I'll do is just add in a block. And I'll call this one, and I'll just add in the who's online. Actually, let me just click on save and update. Sometimes the title, if you add a title in, and then you add in a block without saving it, when the block comes, when the modal closes down, it must refresh this form, and then you lose a selected page title. So let me just do that. Okay, so what I'll do now, and this is important, and I did find another bug here. Notice the ordering here. You have default, and then you have panels. And the order is default and panels. Whereas if you go here, you'll see that panels and default are ordered the opposite way around. Now, the ordering is very important because what Page Manager does is that it starts from the top down. So if you have variants with a lot of selection criteria or custom criteria, always order that to the top because Drupal will come along, see the conditions which are used, and then if the first one returns false, then it skips to the next one. And then if that one returns false, it skips to the next one until it finds one that returns true. Now, if you haven't specified any selection criteria, then it always returns true. So just be aware of that, and I'll demonstrate that. So let's just update this. And if we go to the home page, okay, we see the custom home page, which is great. But then if we go open up a new private window, you will see that we see the default homepage, and because I selected who's online, it technically can't see who's online, okay? But you can see that the default variant is getting loaded up. Now, what will happen if we move this to the top? If we move default to the top and then click on update and save. Well, the default's always going to show because it'll always return true because there are no selection criteria. So just be aware of that. And I've worked on projects in the past where we had 5 to 7 different variant types. So just be aware of that. Oh, excuse me. Okay. So now we've looked at variants and different pages. Now let's look at the in-place editor. So let's quickly move on to the in-place editor. And so I'll just go and enable Panels IPE. And IPE is a submodule that comes with Panels. And then just go click on, and I'll just click on install. And we're going good for time. Okay, good. Okay, now what Panels IPE does is that it changes the way you modify the page, okay, the actual Panels page. So if we go to our Panels homepage, which we created, and then you come to content. Let's just reorder this. So Panels is up the top. Okay. Come on, hit save and done. Okay. So this is how you currently manage Panels pages. But the problem with this is that, first of all, it's very admin-ish. It's using the admin theme. It's very hard to visualize where the left side or the right side region is in the layout, in the actual theme in general. You don't have a proper representation of what this looks like on the front end. And this is where in-place editor, hence the name in-place editor, helps. So to enable it, all you need to do is first go to General, and then from the Builder dropdown, previously we only had one option, and that was Standard. Now we have In-Place Editor. So just select that, and don't click on Delete this variant. I did that by accident. The button's way too close to it. And then just click on Update and Save. And then if we go to the home page, you get this nice little widget down at the bottom. Change layout, manage content, and edit. And what I'll do is I'll just remove this block on the side. This blocks, just so that you can see it properly. Okay. Let's just remove that and... Oh, wrong tab. Alrighty. So now, as I mentioned, what In-Place Editor does is that it allows you to modify this page directly from here. So if you click on Manage Content, click on Edit first, and then you can click and drag blocks into different regions. You can even reconfigure them, which is pretty cool. And another thing to be aware of is make sure, if you want to move it over to a particular region, make sure you hover over the region and it turns green so that it snaps in, because if you don't, it won't move over. But as you can see, IPE is a great module for editors, and it gives them the ability to move things around. If you want to give this to editors, again, it's up to you. Editors can do a lot of damage with access to this page if a Drupal site was developed in a particular way. And another thing you can also do is change layouts. You come here, we can select 2 columns stacked. We can hit save. We can move things around up to the top there, which is pretty cool. You can even add in different content. You can create content directly. Now, as I was mentioning in the beginning, Drupal 8 now utilizes blocks, and there's a custom block type that comes with Drupal 8 standard installation, I think, and that's called basic block, and that allows you to embed just arbitrary blocks. So what you can do is you can put in a bunch of content. So we can call this test block and add in a whole bunch of stuff. Just put in a bunch of stuff. You can even select a different text format and then configure it. So let's just add it to the bottom region and we can add it in and click on save. Another cool thing which you can do if you have quick edit is you can even use quick edit. And believe it or not, if you use quick edit, that's great. I spend more time fighting with it, to be honest. Sometimes this little widget just covers the area that I want to edit. And for some reason, it can be difficult to use, but it works, okay? Which is pretty cool. So that's in-place editor. It's great for managing pages like this, and it gives you a nice visual representation. You do, however, have these extra blocks. So if you were to give this to an end user, you may have to clean up and style up these regions and make sure there's enough padding between it. You know, like take this for example. So let me try this annotation tool. Oh yeah, cool. Let me try this annotation tool right here. So you can see stuff here where you want to put a bit of padding in there to make sure that it looks nice and that it's separated out. So you may have to do a bit extra work, but you can end up with a fairly nice polished front end that users can use to create awesome pages. All right, I'm just looking at my list. So we've talked about how to create pages, how to do custom variants, how to use in-place editor. The last thing I want to show you is layouts, okay? Let's just get rid of this. All right. Let me just remove that. Okay, cool. So let's go back into Extend, and what I'll do is I'll enable, scroll to the top, and enable Bootstrap Layouts. Now, Bootstrap Layouts, as I was mentioning earlier on, that is a module that ships a bunch of Bootstrap grid layouts. And the best thing about it is that it can be used for Display Suite and panels and or Panelizer. And that's about it. It's great. It's great for that. So if you are going to utilize Bootstrap, the Bootstrap theme, I don't recommend you shipping your own layouts. Just use Bootstrap Layouts, and if you have to, you can always override the layout, or you can tweak any custom classes using a pre-processed hook. So let's just install this module. All right, let's go back to our pages. Oh, before I do that, let's enable the Bootstrap theme. Now, I'm going to enable the Bootstrap theme, but if you were to use this on a proper website, make sure you create a sub-theme and do it properly. But this is just a webinar. Okay, let's go back into Pages, Homepage, and let's go into Layouts. And you'll see that you get this new option under Bootstrap called just a bunch of layouts here. So let's just select 2 columns and click on Change Layout. You get these extra options on the side. So you can do some pretty cool things where you can specify different grid sizes for each region and also for the layout in general. So if you have used Bootstrap in the past, you will know what I'm talking about. So you can specify the size of the grid when you're on mobile, desktop, or tablet. And then you can even add in extra attributes, which is pretty cool. But because we're utilizing another, a new layout, we need to migrate the regions from the old layout to the new one. So what we'll do is just tell the system that, okay, top goes into left, right goes into left, and bottom goes into right. And let's just hit save and update. And if we go to content, yep, that looks good. And then if we go to the home page, and I did find there was a funny issue where I had to resave the, whoops, apologies, where I had to save this. All right, you can see that this is, let me just remove. Remove this page builder because I did have issues with the in-place editor and Bootstrap. Well, let's just fix this up. And let's just hit refresh. Okay, let me just check this out. This is very interesting. Why is this not working? 2-column grid. 2-column small. Left, right. See, live demos never work well. It was working well in the demo. Okay, there we go. So as I warned you, this is all still alphas and betas. So, you know, test it out before you push it onto a production site. So that was interesting. The settings weren't getting set. So if you do get stuck, come back to the layout settings and hit save and update. And this is where panels can get sometimes a bit can get a bit annoying because you make an update, or let's just say you add in a new region, you think it's been added, and then you quickly go and test it, and you're like, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? And you're looking through the code, spending 20 minutes, and you come back and it's like, oh, I didn't even click on save and update, or update and save. Oh. So just make sure you update and save all the time. Any questions? All right, so I see a lot of advocating for paragraphs, and it's being used as a page manager. How are you deciding when to use page manager over panels, or the other way around? Now that is a good question. I've talked about paragraphs a lot in the past, and I've utilized it in a lot of projects. You can use both, okay? Now, let me explain why. So paragraphs I would always give to an editor, okay? Paragraphs is safe enough to give to an editor, and you give them enough flexibility where they can add things, but they can't break things. But you would use you would use Page Manager and panels to create arbitrary pages that a site builder will create, and you would configure it once, and that's it. Essentially, you wouldn't give an editor access to a panels page. So let's say you're building, let's just say you're building a Drupal site with a custom blog, okay? And one of the requirements is that on that, there has to be a page /blog, and you have the blog listing on the left and the blog listing on the right. Well, what you could do is a site builder could create that using panels, because really the layout wouldn't change. The blocks that appear on the side will change, but that you can easily handle by, you could create some type of custom, you could create some custom block type that appears on the left-hand side. But the way I see it is that Page Manager is a site building tool for site builders, whereas paragraphs is used for editors to build out entity pages. Because remember, you can't attach a paragraphs field to Page Manager or panels. That's another thing to be aware of. So you will have to attach it to some type of entity, i.e. a content type, like a basic page. But you can use both. And I've used both in Drupal 7 in the past. And I've used paragraphs, and this is going to be a lot of P's. I've used paragraphs with Panelizer on a page content type. And I've done that in Drupal 7, and that's worked pretty well. So you can use both, but just remember paragraphs is more of an editor tool. And as a site builder, you would use paragraphs to create reusable components, and panels and page manager is more of a site building tool. Yes. So the question is, ideally we can enable IPE after building the site to allow clients to edit some content and layouts. Yes, you can, but, now this is a but, be aware, okay? With great power comes great responsibility. So I really haven't touched on this, but if you've used Drupal in the past, and I'm not really sure how this works with configuration management. So Drupal 8 had this massive initiative where all configuration was stored out in code in YAML files, okay? And the whole point was to not store configuration in the database. Now, as a site builder, if I was to create a panels page and then export it out, everything's fine. I could build the page locally, export it out into YAML files, deploy it to the site, and we're done. If you then allow an editor to modify it on the production site, they are changing the configuration. Now, that is a good question. I'm not sure what actually happens if they modify, because essentially, if you do another deployment and in your deploy scripts, you say override everything that's on production so that everything in code is deployed to production, you are essentially overriding what's on production with what's in code. Now this is getting low level, but you can do it, but just test it out with your production, with your deployment strategies, because I've seen deployment systems where people will just fully revert what's on production to be exactly what's in code. And this is starting to get into configuration management and feature functionality, the feature modules. But you can do it. Panelizer is one of those things where it has this overridden functionality, and I really need to do a webinar on Panelizer. But essentially, Panelizer lets you modify entity pages, but it's stored in code until it's modified using IPE, and then it's considered content. So that's another thing to be aware of. You can do that, yes. So I guess you can pull in the live configuration, but then that's going to be tricky. You can, but that just gives you extra work. Another way to think of it is, instead of using IPE, and the thing is though, I know this is a big limitation in Drupal. There's no good page managers. And that's one thing that annoys the hell out of me. There are no good page managers in Drupal. Other systems, WordPress, have amazing page managers and page builders. But there's no good page manager in Drupal. And for the last couple of years, I've had to hack together all these other bloody systems, excuse me, trying to hack together paragraphs and then using IPE and then all these, but they're all separate systems and they all do separate things. What I would recommend, again, it depends on your requirements. If you want to allow editors to modify content, do it as a paragraph. Use paragraph types instead. Because trying to merge a live configuration with your development configuration, or what's in your master branch, and that's a Git term, what's in your master branch is going to get complicated very quickly. So again, it's one of those things where as site builders, you really need to think about these things. And that's one thing I find fascinating about Drupal, is that you push one thing down, you try and fix one thing, another issue pops up, you push that thing down, another thing pops up, and you're consistently just fighting these fires.